And there was this New York Times report that he did not want to talk about, Elon Musk, that alleged that he, towards the end of his time in the White House, was blurring the lines between recreational use of drugs and medicinal. Do you think he ever had drugs here at the White House?
I really don't know. I don't think so. I hope not. Look, I wish him well. You understand. We had a good relationship, and I just wish him well. Very well, actually. Yeah.
I have stated on this show that I felt like if Trump won, that he owed, in terms of mortal men, he owed one man more than any other for his reelection, and that is Elon Musk. But I've also been saying this, I've never been totally in on Musk insofar as, while I can appreciate certain things about Elon Musk, I've always thought him too leaky a vessel to put too much hope in. Every relationship, if it's to be a good one, it has to survive a crisis at some point. So with any friend, until you've really had a conflict, which is going to happen, you don't know the strength of that relationship because it hasn't been tested. This relationship apparently wasn't particularly strong to begin with. Musk seems to have thought that it was okay to call the president of the United States a pedophile and somebody he claimed to be a friend, and then to not apologize for it. Welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton. And what we're discussing today in Elon Musk affords us what I think is really a wonderful opportunity to get some glimpse as to how ideas, our presuppositions about life, affect not only our behavior, but our entire worldview. So let's kind of recap a little bit what has happened here. And I'm going to go back, not just to the start of this particular conflict, but just a little bit further than that. We've discussed Elon Musk on this show many times, and frequently with appreciation. I want to be clear at the outset here that I've been very grateful for what Elon Musk has done and what he's risked in terms of his purchase of Twitter and preserving some measure of free speech. I still don't think that Twitter X is really a free speech platform. I mean, the algorithm is still heavily weighted in a direction that I don't think is honest to goodness free speech, no matter what Musk says. I mean, clearly some accounts are suppressed. Mine is one of them. But it's better than it was under the Jack Dorsey regime, and certainly there's a lot less leftist garbage being promoted all over that platform, even if it hasn't entirely been cleaned up. And I have stated on this show that I felt like if Trump won, that he owed, in terms of mortal men, he owed one man more than any other for his reelection, and that is Elon Musk. But I've also been saying this all along about Musk. I've never been totally in on Musk insofar as, while I can appreciate certain things about Elon Musk, I've always seen him, to quote a line from the best Western of all time, Lonesome Dove, I've always thought him too leaky a vessel to put too much hope in. And that is because Elon Musk, his worldview is a deeply, deeply flawed worldview. And if inconsistent with his worldview, and I do stress inconsistent with his worldview, he has championed free speech, that's great. The rest of his worldview is a complete shipwreck. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Let's back up just a bit in talking about Musk's attitude towards Trump. I don't know that his attitude until now has been one of complete hostility towards Trump, even before the two of them became, at least very briefly, friends. Or certainly, formed a kind of partnership. If you look back at his tweets prior to his acquisition of Twitter, of X, I can never get used to calling it X, he often made fun of Trump. And he himself admitted that in 2020 that he had voted, that is Musk, that he had voted for Joe Biden. Now, that right away already tells you that Musk's worldview is problematic. How you could arrive at a place where you think voting for Joe Biden makes any sense whatsoever, given his desire, or at least his willingness to be used by an element that wants to burn the whole country to the ground, is beyond me. But anyway, Musk admits that much. But then, kind of late to the scene, Musk realizes, oh my gosh, Democrats want to burn the whole country to the ground. So his view on Trump began to soften a bit. And then when there was the attempt on Trump's life, that deeply, deeply impressed Musk. And he kind of went in, at least for appearance's sake, he gave the impression of going all in on MAGA, on Donald Trump, wearing the hat, dark MAGA, and all this kind of thing. And then being named, the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, as we call it, DOGE. There he was. And what Musk was doing, I think all of us, at least those of us with any sense, were urging him on. Please use all of your know-how. Please use all of your skill to root out corruption, to expose it, to expose government inefficiency, government waste. And by golly, they were doing it. I mean, at least that was the impression we got. We're not on the inside, but let's just say that they got from conservative media sources like those we would find on Twitter, a positive publicity that Musk was exposing, laying bare this media corruption. I was particularly interested as it related to USAID because my own work has focused there in particular. Then we started hearing in recent days that Musk was going to be stepping aside. He had done his work with Doge, and that he was going to be stepping aside and really going back to SpaceX and Tesla and to his day job, so to speak. And then all of a sudden, it's like Hillary Clinton had hacked his Twitter account. I mean, she couldn't have dreamed of tweets that were of the sort that Musk started sending out. And here's the one he sent out on the 5th of this month. 180 million views. Time to drop the really big bomb. Real Donald Trump is on the Epstein list. That is the reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, Donald J. Trump. What the hell? I mean, you see that, and honestly, I saw that. I got a text from some of the people who are involved in this show on the tech side during a show that said, have you seen this meltdown from Musk and Trump? I thought I had, because they were disagreeing about the big, beautiful bill. But I had no idea about this. None. And so I thought, there's some modest disagreement here. Some of it's been made public, but I didn't realize that Musk had tweeted something like this. Now, I know that there are some of you who dislike Donald Trump and who are inclined to think that Musk is telling the truth and that Trump is on the Epstein list. Well, we've had Roger Stone. We've had a lawyer for Epstein. We've had numerous others say that that's not true. Individuals who are in a place to know, who have said absolutely false, not true at all. But let's just suppose that none of those people came out and said that. Let's just suppose that we didn't have any knowledge of that. Let's consider Musk's logic here. According to his logic, that Trump is on the Epstein list, according to Musk's logic, that would mean that Democrats were protecting Trump, that they knew that he was on the list, that they had the smoking gun to ruin him in 2016 and in 2020 and 2024, and they never used it. Now, some of you, the more cynical among you, say, but the reason they didn't is because it was mutually assured destruction. They don't have to release the whole list. They could just release part of it. They could just release a part. They could fabricate a list that has true elements, like Donald Trump being on it, if indeed that were the case, and say, here it is. And no matter what Trump said, it would just be written off as, yeah, well, he's just trying to lay blame on other people and make claims that he can't substantiate. And he wouldn't be able to substantiate them because he wouldn't have access at that time, pre-election, in all three cases, 2016, 2020, and 2024, he wouldn't have access to the Department of Justice and to those files. So, according to Musk, Democrats knew this, and they de facto protected Trump, shielded him from this truth when they could use it and absolutely annihilate his candidacy for president of the United States. That makes no sense. That logic, Elon, will take you about as far as an electric car, which is not very far. And one senses that that's part of what's going on here, because Donald Trump in the big, beautiful bill is attacking electric cars, which I frankly love. I mean, I love that he's attacking them, not that I love electric cars. I want to see the V8 back. But anyway, that's a whole different topic. But we do know that some of those subsidies that Musk has been the recipient of, and the Democrat policy which has pushed electric in a very big way, Trump's not in favor of it. Trump is not in favor of it. So Musk comes out and he accuses Trump of being essentially a pedophile. That's what the accusation is. I said that online, and some people said, oh, he never called him a pedophile. Saying that you are on the Epstein list is saying you're a pedophile. That's absolutely what is implied in that particular statement. This is an unstable tweet. It suggests an individual who is kind of unhinged with a tweet of this kind. But this is what he does. He just immediately attacks Trump. Now, again, another aspect of this that draws all of this into question is, if he knew this, why didn't he say it earlier? Why did he partner with him? Why did he let his child go and hang out with Donald Trump on Air Force One? Well, because he doesn't actually believe that. And that was demonstrated by the fact that the very next day, someone said, you guys should make peace. And Elon said, yes, we should. We should make peace. I'll call President Trump tomorrow. Do you do that? Do you make up with someone you believe to be a pedophile? I wouldn't. I don't think Musk would either, even though his worldview is all sail, no anchor. No, he doesn't believe that. He doesn't believe that. He's angry. He's probably on drugs. And his worldview cannot provide him with stability and with direction. And so he turns, he tweets something awful like this. Now, I want to say this for the female members of our audience who may not know, maybe didn't have brothers or sons. Guys fight very different than women. That is to say, most guys do, not Elon. Elon processes more like a woman. Some people are going to trash me for that, but I'll come back to this. Guys fight very different. When I was a kid, growing up in those days, kids grow up in the neighborhood. There was the boy across the street that you played ball with, and another one, down the street that you rode bicycles with, and the kids gathered in the neighborhood after school and on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, and they played ball. We rode our bicycles. We skateboarded. We played hide and seek. We played army. You name it. We did all that stuff. Built forts. And just in the natural course of life, just as it is when we're adults, you would get into disagreements, sometimes serious for that age. You're out of bounds. No, I was in. You're out of bounds. No, I was in. He's out. No, he was safe. And sometimes it would come to fist fights. Boys and men are like this too. Our conflicts are different because they're usually frontal. That is, it's a frontal assault. It's out in the open. We say what's on our mind. We go at it with each other, and we fight, and then we laugh about it later. That's the way it usually is. Guys are not usually subtle and scheming and plotters. It's not the way the typical guy operates. We're usually pretty out in the open about what it is that we think. Again, some people are the exception to this rule, but typically that's the way guys operate. And the result of that is, with my own brother, we could get into serious fistfights, and then afterwards, we're playing Atari, we're doing something together. Conflicts among men, among boys, can heat up quickly, and they tend to resolve themselves pretty quickly. They don't brood over them for days or weeks or months. It's a difference between men and women. And I'm not just saying that it's better. I'm just saying that it's different. But women process things, there's all the jokes. I recall the comedian Pam Stone. I haven't seen her for years, but she's very funny, and she was talking about this very thing. And she said that one day her husband came in, and she said, I had told him that my car was driving. I was making a terrible noise, and something was wrong with it, and he needed to fix it. He said, so he comes to me, and he says, sweetheart, I just looked at your car, and you've been driving around with the emergency brake on for the last 6 months. And so Pam Stone says, I looked at him, and I said, well, your hair looks funny. And he said, well, what does that have to do with anything? And she said, I said to him, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. Her point was we process differently, and we also fight differently. And she says, and I win every argument. She says, because he doesn't know how to respond to things like that. Men and women process things very differently. And, of course, there's the old joke about, your wife will bring, your girlfriend, your daughter will bring up some offense of yours that's months or years old that you've long since forgotten about. But she's put it in her quiver to draw out on you on a particular day. You see, the thing is that God has designed men and women in very different ways. But with women, I think most men would say, yeah, women process very differently, but at least there's a payoff at the end of that rainbow, meaning it's worth it to stick with it, because in the end, a woman's a woman, and you have the benefits of a woman. I'm not just talking about a wife or a girlfriend. I'm just talking about the things that women bring to the table by virtue of the fact that they're women. A nurturing nature, domestic abilities, kindness, gentleness, these kinds of things. A man might say, she processes in a way that I don't fully understand, but in the end, I'm willing to tolerate it. But men are not willing to tolerate men who process like women. And Musk processes like a woman, or so it seems, except a woman on drugs. And it does seem there are strong reports that are being offered that Musk, these kinds of outbursts are drug fueled. Trump himself, it's reported, has said that Musk is a big time drug user. And if you combine that with the fact that Musk is on the spectrum, which I don't fully understand because I don't know a great deal about that. I don't know a great deal about autism. I don't know. I've seen a data Republican who we're going to have on our show. She has talked about this with a lot of inside knowledge and in how it affects an individual and their behavior in ways that I don't pretend to understand, because no member of my family is autistic, and I've not had any friends who are autistic. Not by design. It's just the way things have played out. So I don't pretend to really deeply understand that condition. But apparently, these kinds of outbursts can be common among such people. And then you add to that drugs, becomes problematic. But one of the things that, and again, the timeline here. So Musk says this. Next day he says, yeah, let's make peace. I'll call the president. And Trump says in an interview, and I paraphrase, Musk is unhinged I wish him well, but I have no desire to talk to him. And then what do you know? What do you know? Musk then has yet another meltdown. And what does he say in that particular occasion? He says, I'll apologize profusely as soon as there is a full dump of the Epstein files. So he just goes straight back. That makes you think that the desire to seek peace was never genuine. And when Trump rejects the overture of peace, he says no. Now, as I've said, boys, men, their conflicts are different because they heat up quickly and they can resolve themselves quickly. But I will say this, I've never had anybody call me a pedophile. I've never called one of my friends a pedophile, meaning that even in the midst of heated arguments, you always know, if you're sensible, that there's a line. I can recall a very funny incident when I was a kid, having my brother in a headlock, and I'm about to really let him have it. And I say to him, I could knock your teeth out right now. And his face was all squished up, and he says, do it. And I couldn't stop laughing. I just started laughing, the moment he said that. I was never going to try to knock his teeth out. That wasn't the goal. You with your friend, you're not trying to knock his teeth out. He may give you a free shot, but that's not what you're aiming for. You may have him down. He might have you down and twisting your arm, but you're not going to break it because that's not the goal. He's your friend. And even in the middle of a fight, there's some measure of restraint. You know his sensitivities, his vulnerabilities, and the things you should not say. Right? I know some of you are going to say, with my friends, we break each other's arms. Okay, whatever, but that's not typical. That's not typical behavior. It's not civilized behavior. There are unwritten rules even in a fight. You're not picking up a knife or a glass bottle with your friend. It usually becomes, if some fists are thrown and there's a wrestling match and one person forces the other to yield, and then it resolves itself. But you're not really going for the jugular. And that's part of the problem here, is because Musk, he just immediately goes to DEFCON 1. He just goes nuclear on Trump and makes the most vile accusation you could possibly make. I honestly can't think of anything worse than to call him a sexual abuser of children. Operating within my own, moral framework, that's as bad as it gets. And my moral framework is informed by the Bible. So it's understandable that Trump wouldn't be rushing to make up with Musk. I dare say that if I'd have been in a fight with one of my friends and he called me that, or if I called him that, he might not go, no biggie, let bygones be bygones. I mean, it's a vile accusation. It's an utterly vile accusation with potentially explosive political consequences, fallout on top of it. Democrats must have been gleeful at this, must have been absolutely gleeful to see this happening, to see what Musk was doing. Listen, typically, over the course of a relationships, my wife made this observation years ago, and I've thought that it's a great observation, reflecting on this several times as I have, that every relationship, if it's to be a good one, it has to survive a crisis at some point. So with any friend, or let's just say, a marital situation, until you've really had a conflict, which is going to happen, you don't know the strength of that relationship because it hasn't been tested. And so if it's to become a good relationship, crisis must occur. I don't mean you artificially, induce it, but crisis must occur and you must be able to survive it. And when you do, you're able to look back on that and you learn something about yourself and about each other and about the relationship. and the relationship becomes stronger as a result of that. This relationship apparently wasn't particularly strong to begin with. Musk seems to have thought that it was okay to call the president of the United States a pedophile and somebody he claimed to be a friend, and then did not apologize for it, and he didn't. And then to turn around and to repeat the accusation again. And then in very Elon Musk fashion, the next day just start tweeting about everything else as though it never happened. Isn't that kind of the worst in any conflict? I mean, don't you hate that when somebody has wronged you and then acts like they didn't? Not only do they not apologize, they just don't even acknowledge anything happened. Which lends credence to the idea that Musk and his outbursts are drug-fueled. Why else would you behave in that kind of manner? Again, being on the spectrum may play some role here. I can't say that with any particular certainty. But one of the things that I really want to drive home here is, first of all, calling someone a pedophile seems to be Musk's kind of go-to accusation when he's really upset, when he wants to go nuclear. You may recall some years ago when the boys in Thailand were trapped in a cave, rising water, and they're, in this subterranean perilous situation where they're trapped. Oxygen is slowly, deteriorating. The quality of oxygen, the availability of oxygen. Water has risen. The only way to get to them is for divers to go down to them. And Musk, seeing this before he acquired Twitter, he began, talking about maybe sending a submarine or something like this. And a diver in Thailand, who was British, I believe, he questioned the wisdom of Musk's plan. And Musk turned around and called him a pedo, and then wouldn't back off of it. And when the guy sued Musk for libel, Musk won because he had all the money. The court said that whether he's really a pedo or not, that Musk could call him that. And then Musk very reluctantly apologized for calling him that, meaning Musk never really believed that the guy was a pedophile. He just called him that because he was angry and because he didn't like, as the richest man in the world, or one of them, he didn't like being questioned. And so he lashes out at this guy in this way. So this is a go-to for Musk. This isn't his first time to do this particular thing. But the idea that I really want to get at here is that Musk is an atheist. Now, some of you might want to atomize that and say, well, I've had some people say he's Luciferian, he's pagan, he's this sort of thing. I'm not going there. I'm not getting into all of that. What I'm saying is he does not believe in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He does not. He's a big fan of an atheist I know reasonably well, a man by the name of Richard Dawkins. He's tweeted him. He's interacted with him. He's read his books. He clearly is on board with the ideas that Dawkins is promoting, and that is that the Bible is nonsense, the biblical God is nonsense, the resurrection is nonsense, life hereafter is nonsense. And that worldview informs much of what Musk does. Musk is in a favor of transhumanism, which I think is kind of satanic. Maybe it really is just outright satanic. He's in favor of Neuralink, putting brain chips into people. But where Musk's worldview really comes out, his atheistic worldview really comes out, is in his treatment of women and his view of children. Really, his view of human beings in general. You see, if you do not believe in the God of the Bible, I'm not just going to say God, because there are lots of gods, or claims of gods. But there's really only one real God, and that's the biblical God. And that God, Scripture says that human beings are made in his likeness, that we don't have the divine within us. Rather, our divine creator created us with divine purpose and for relationship with him, and that he has set us at the pinnacle of the created order. He's given us souls. We're fundamentally eternal beings. And that people who are motivated by that worldview, they see the world in a very different way, and they certainly see their fellow man in a different way. I do not equate human babies with piglets the way Peter Singer does, who is an atheist, Princeton University bioethicist, who argues that mothers should get 28 days with newborn children to determine whether or not to keep them or to euthanize them. And given his atheistic worldview, it makes perfect sense. Because in Singer's worldview, there are no objects of special creation because there's no special creation because there's no God. So human beings have no more value than a colony of ants. Animals are animals, and we're just one of them that occupies space on the planet. And there's no God to judge in the hereafter our actions in this life. So Singer is a utilitarian. We just do what works best for the community. But there's no real absolute morality because there's no real God and thus no absolutes. You see how problematic that is. And I have warned time and again that Musk is not a conservative. Musk is anti-woke. And there's a difference between being anti-woke and being conservative. That's part of what threatens the conservative movement in the United States, is because there are a lot of people who have been confused with conservatism who are simply anti-woke. Andrew Tate, for instance, Candace Owens, who's an anti-Semite, and Elon Musk. None of those people are conservatives. They're anti-woke. And that is a very, very different thing. But their view of humanity frequently is antithetical to a biblical view. Tate is a Muslim. Candace Owens is from some weird, heretical offshoot of Catholicism that has a strong strain of anti-Semitism in it. And by the way, she has been heavily influenced by Andrew Tate. Musk's atheism leads him to see human beings the way we might see a plant. You just give it a little sunlight, a little food, a little water, and poof, it grows. I'm not really even talking about Musk's sexual behavior per se. That at least is, you could understand. It's this idea that he's going to procreate with as many women as he can, plant his seed, in other words, far and wide, and let these children grow up without a father, without a proper family. That somehow in his mind, he thinks that's a good thing, wants to bring them all together into some kind of weird compound and commune where he sits at the head like a sultan of some kind of harem. These things should disturb Christians who have championed Musk in this conflict. I'm not on Team Musk. I'm on Team Free Speech, and if he advances that, great. I'm on Team Doge. If he advances that, great. I'm on Team Anti-Corruption. If he advances that, great. But I don't put any hope in Elon Musk because I can see from his life, I can see from his worldview, I can see from things like Neuralink and the plan to go to Mars and populate it there, that what's driving it is a fundamentally godless worldview. That's who Elon Musk is. And because of that, he has no rational basis for belief in free speech, for human dignity. You don't get that from atheism. Atheism doesn't provide that. Musk himself, he oscillates between, on the one hand, a kind of anti-woke American patriotism and nihilism. He seems to go back and forth between the two, and you can see it in these tweets. It's why Trump, I think, is wise to disassociate from him and say, I wish him well. Anytime you've ever been around people who have these kinds of meltdowns, and I have a few times with individuals where just out of the blue, they just nuke you. It's wise to keep your distance from people like that because they're fundamentally unstable, and they might do it again. And as Steve Bannon has pointed out, after this particular meltdown by Musk, Trump needs to deny him, any security clearance. Trump needs to disassociate himself from him because he's dangerous and because he's unstable. And to those of you who think I'm being an Elon Musk hater, that's not my intention. I hope Elon Musk becomes a Christian. I hope Elon Musk finds stability. I hope Elon Musk, ahead of anything he does with SpaceX or Twitter or Tesla, I hope he becomes a good father. Kind of impossible now with all these different mothers with whom he's procreated. I don't know how you do that, but at least in some kind of way, you see one of his son or is it a daughter has declared themselves trans and is clearly full of self-loathing. That's Musk's fault. That's his fault. You have a child and you abandon your child. What do you think is going to be the result of that? But you see, if you think human beings are not the objects of special creation made in the image of their creator, then you arrive at the conclusion that there is no soul. There is a soul, and the souls of these children are crying out because they have been placed in very unnatural, unhealthy circumstances because of the man who fathered them. This behavior is evil. And it's a reason why you need to be aware of who this guy is. Listen, I'll offer this additional insight. There is a theory in conflict resolution that goes something like this, and I think this is a very good theory. It maintains that in just about any conflict of what appears to be just two people, that there is in fact a third party to the conflict. In other words, that conflicts are triangles. That they're triangles. And that until you can identify who that third unseen participant to the conflict is, you'll never resolve the conflict. And I find that very frequently is the case. So let's just say, for example, you are in conflict with your teenage daughter. All of a sudden, you're like, gosh, we've always agreed on this before, but now all of a sudden my daughter is, upset and she's talking back to me, and suddenly it feels like we're not friends. What's going on here? And then you discover there's a new boyfriend in her life, and that her boyfriend is filling her head with nonsense about how she needs to ignore her parents and defy them and don't let them tell you how to live your life. You ever found a circumstance like that? Sometimes the third person in the triangle is an individual who is quite consciously manipulating one of the parties to the conflict. But sometimes they're parties to the conflict without even knowing they're parties to the conflict. So again, to use the example, the hypothetical that you are in conflict with your daughter, and you don't understand why you're in conflict with your daughter, why all of a sudden you're in conflict with your daughter, and then you discover that she has been taking an online course where the professor in this course has said something that she has decided to act on in a way that the professor never intended for her to do. Meaning the professor wasn't trying to turn your daughter against you. It is just rather that she took an idea, she took something that was said in that course or from a TV show or from a song or from a class at school, and she's acted upon it. Again, there's your triangle. But sometimes the third party to the triangle can also be an inanimate thing. In this case, drugs. Drugs can be the third party to the conflict that is causing the conflict. I offer that to you because it's worth bearing in mind just at a personal level. just at a very practical level, when you find yourself in conflict with an individual, there are no absolutes. Counselors will tell you that there are no absolutes in counseling, but this one is pretty close. And that when you're in conflict with somebody, you need to ask yourself, who is the third party to this conflict? And until you can identify who that is, you're probably not going to be able to resolve the conflict, because you need to know who that party is and what their motives are. But in this case, it appears to be, and I'm speculating, it appears to be drugs, at least according to some reports, that is causing this irrational behavior from Elon Musk. But the fundamental thing that I really wanted to communicate in this episode of Ideas Have Consequences is that when your foundation is as faulty as Elon Musk's is, you're beginning with a godless worldview, the trajectory of your life will go spinning off into space. And you see guys like Musk get away with treating people like this from time. I see all too many people on social media who are prepared to let Musk get away with this because they go, oh, well, he's a genius. Why should that make a difference? Okay, so he puts rockets in space. Great. Doesn't mean he gets to act trashy, and it doesn't mean that he's a genius in other areas, which he clearly is not. Some of them, it's just perhaps he's just not cut out for government work, for that kind of pressure. I don't know. But very frequently, an individual who has success, and he's been wildly successful with SpaceX and Tesla. Sometimes what that does to an individual is it makes them think that they're infallible in other areas too, that I can pronounce authoritatively on government, on history, on philosophy, on God. And no one dare question me because I'm Elon Musk or Bill Gates or George Soros or could be Donald Trump. Any of us can go there. It's not healthy for us. And it feels to me that a lot of people are making excuses for Elon Musk when what he's doing to his children is just wicked. It's just terrible. His plans for transhumanism, terrible. That they're making excuses for him there because they think you need him. Well, we need him for Twitter. I don't think God needs any one of us. And I would urge you to put your faith and trust in a source that is truly infallible, that is truly true with a capital T, and whose promises never fail. Because at the end of the day, and Elon Musk is going to disappoint you, especially given his worldview, but I can disappoint you. Donald Trump can disappoint you. Your wife, your spouse, your children can disappoint you. None of us none of us are impervious to that. And thus we need to put our faith and trust in him who never fails and seek his guidance in the cultural Armageddon situation that we find ourselves in. This has been another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton.